Today we're looking at the long brief for circuit flapless and go-arounds. So I'll just skip over housekeeping as it is an online brief. So aim. The aim of this brief is to explain the procedures and techniques to perform an approach and landing without flaps as well as a go-around. So we're still in the circuit area for this lesson, but today I'm going to take it a step further and look at how to land the aeroplane without flaps and the procedures used to do so. And also I'll be explaining some of the reasons why we need to do a go-around and how to do a go-around as well. There's also developing your ability to identify when there is a need to implement these techniques in order to manage the situation and mitigate the error on not doing so. So that if the situation arises where you do have to do a flapless landing or a go-around, you're well equipped to carry out the maneuver. So motivation for you as pilot in command: build your skills and demonstrate competence in situations where the unexpected occurs. And if the unexpected occurs, you have the tools to be able to best respond to it. Allow you to better assess the situation and therefore manage the state of the aeroplane better to achieve a safe outcome. A safe outcome is the ideal outcome for any flight. And then finally, improve your ability to stay ahead of the aeroplane throughout your flying career. So it's important to stay ahead of the aeroplane through all maneuvers and all throughout your flight training, otherwise the aeroplane will get ahead of you. So an overview of what we'll look at. So objectives, that's the take-home message. We'll look at a revision from our circuits and stalling brief. We'll have a look at definitions that are relevant today. Look at reasons for flapless approaches, characteristics of flapless approach, what you'll actually see in flight. Look at the reasons for a go-around, which we discussed briefly in circuits lesson. Look at the applications of what we'll actually be doing in the air. The airmanship and threat management considerations, some of the threats that exist in this lesson, and how we can mitigate them. I'll summarize everything, and then finally I'll ask you a few questions with the objectives. So there's two objectives, they're both flapless and go-around. So following this brief, you'll be able to, from memory, describe two instances when a flapless landing may be necessary. So it's really important you can recognize these reasons in flight, then you can go ahead and land without flaps. Identify the correct approach speeds when forming flapless landing. So it's important, flaps change our stall speed. So if we don't have flaps, we need to compensate that, change our speed so that we can maintain a safe margin of the stall speed. Describe the anticipated nose attitude approach. So it's different to normal approach. So I'll explain, the flight attitudes and what you'll actually see in flight in terms of approach. And then describe the effect a flapless landing has on the landing roll. So it's different to a normal landing with flaps. It affects our landing roll. Describe at least two instances when a go-around may be necessary. So once again, if you know the reason, you can recognize it in flight and realize, you need to do a go-around. Name someone who can instigate a go-around. So there's two people. And I'll also tell you what the radio calls will be. State what actions the pilot will take following the decision to go. It's really important. We have to aviate, navigate, communicate. Fly the airplane first, navigate, and then communicate last as well. State the path the pilot would take following the decision to go around. It's important. We want to know how we must fly the airplane and rejoin the circuit pattern again, so we can have another go at landing the airplane. So in terms of revision, so you can pause the video and you can work through the revision, but I'll give you the answers now. So what is a work cycle used on downwind? So the work cycle used on downwind is you start off with your leveling off 1,000 feet. You're doing your radio call, and then you're doing height, heading, speed, spacing. And you're working through your brumfish, and then doing your approach configuration. So to calculate the VT test for a 60 knot headwind, so for every knot above 10, so we've got 6 knots, we halve it. So half of 6 is 3 knots, and then we add it onto our VREF speed. So that's 68 knots. So that's really important. That's relevant for today. If there's significant wind, we can compensate for it and add that on. What actions would you take if you're high in approach? You would lower the nose to get back onto your aim point. Pardon me. And that's important because it's quite a common scenario for students to be high in approach, and so there's things you can do about it to correct the situation. And then finally, what is the effect of extending flaps on our stall speed? So when you extend flaps, it decreases our stall speed. So by not having flaps in the first place, our stall speed increases. So that's relevant. So that's why we have to have that margin of our stall speed. We have to increase our speeds as well. And with the pilot's lift formula, flap affects that coefficient of lift. During the approach, whether the decision is made to discontinue the approach and landing and apply full power to climb to circuit height. So let's say the pilot just misjudges approach, or if there's an aeroplane on the runway, like in this situation, the pilot is discontinuing the landing and climbing back up to circuit height for another go at landing the aeroplane. Can be instigated by can be instigated by the pilot or by tower. So we established this in our objectives. These are the two people. And in this lesson, we've got that threat of traffic being too close, the error being a failure to identify traffic, and the undesired aircraft state will be too close. So make sure you look out for traffic. For example, it could be the runway, and you listen to tower as well. Landing climb performance. This is when the pilot aborts the approach whilst in the landing configuration with all engines operating at takeoff power. So it's calculated using takeoff and landing performance charts of what our aeroplane will achieve in feet per minute in terms of the pressure height. The aeroplane must have the ability to achieve a glide gradient of 3.2% in standard atmospheric conditions, ISA, at a speed not exceeding 1.3 Vs. So for our aeroplanes, it's 1.3 times the stall speed of 44 knots, so 57 knots minimum. But our aeroplane achieves well beyond that speed in the go-around. And this is in CAO 20.7.4, paragraph 9.1, so it's a legal requirement. So, and the 3.2% over here means that the aeroplane must be able to climb 3.2 feet per 100 feet it travels. So reasons for flapless operations. So if any part of the flap or flap system fails, a flapless landing will be necessary. So for example, the flap lever is stuck in the position, or no matter if the mechanism could be broken, so you can still extend the lever, but the flaps don't extend. May also be required if there is an electric failure in an aeroplane with electrically operated flaps. So in the Piper Cherokees have the mechanical flaps, but the Cessna aeroplanes, they've got electric flaps, so if there's an electrical failure, the pilot has no option but to land without flaps. Consider using partial or no flaps during a landing in gusty/windy conditions. This means there's less surface area for the wind to act through. Due to the higher stall speed and less drag, we will have a faster approach speed. So from our effective control lesson, what will this do to our control surface effectiveness? Well, it will increase the effectiveness of the controls, providing greater control during landing. So it's makes it easier for the pilot to control during gusts or wind shear, wind blowing from different directions and different speeds. There might be sufficient crosswind in this lesson. So, in your flapless and go-around lesson, so we got that threat of weather. The error will be failure to check TAF/ATIS, and the undesired aircraft state will be an excessive crosswind. So make sure you check the TAF and ATIS, and if it's way too windy, if it's outside of your limits, then simply don't fly. Characteristics of a flapless landing. So this is all the characteristics you'll see in flight. So the flight path will be flatter. Flaps means more drag, and you've got a steeper approach. So if you've got no flaps, you haven't got a steep approach. The approach speed will be faster to compensate and maintain a safe margin of the stall speed. A high nose attitude to maintain the same amount of lift, and you'll see this, we'll need the eye angle tack to compensate for our slow speeds. Increased float on the runway, and since we don't have that drag to slow us down, and longer ground roll since we're coming in faster. So you're doing a landing with flaps, steeper approach, slower ground speed, shorter landing roll, and then with flaps you've got a shallow approach, bit of a float, and a longer ground roll as well. And those numbers are used as for an example only. So reasons for a go-around. So you may initiate the go-around at any time as soon as any doubt exists about the safety of the approach, as you could risk a hard landing or an undesired aircraft state. You must go around when instructed by tower, either by radio or by lights. So we'll look at this in our application of how it's conducted. It is very difficult to make a good landing from a poor approach. Only a good landing can be done from a good stabilised approach, and good airmanship dictates that if you have a poor approach, you should discontinue it and go around. So just because tower tells you, you're clear to land, doesn't mean you have to land. It's up to you as PRC to determine if it's safe enough to land. So if in doubt, take the safe option and go around. So, in terms of go-around pilot instigated reason, so these are the following circumstances which a go-around may be necessary, and it's not limited to these. So, excessive crosswinds, um, and we may be doing a flapless landing, but it's too windy, so you have to go around as you could risk veering off the runway. More than 40 degrees angle bank base or final, so this is dangerous because we could exceed our load factor, especially being quite low and slow. Not lined up on final by 400 feet, you want to aim to have wings level by 500 feet. Using large S turns, trying to overcompensate and, not quite getting on that center line. Clearance not achieved by 200 feet to prevent an indecent rapport, especially at Class D airspace. Dissatisfied with the approach, so you're too fast, you're too high. Dangerous bounce on touchdown, you could risk having a second bounce. Not touchdown by a third length of the runway. At Bankstown Airport here in Sydney, we've got nice and long runways, but some runways are short, so you want to aim to do a short field, and if you haven't touched down, consider going around, as you could overrun or too close to preceding landing aircraft. And that's one of the threats, is the threat of unstable approach. There will be not identifying deviation, and underside aircraft state may be higher landing, so make sure you go around. So in terms of the application, we'll have a look at a flapless approach, a go around instigated by tower using radio and light signals. So flapless landing, so it's the exact same circuit up until the last section as well. So you've got doing your pre-landing checks, your bumfish, brakes, undercarriage, mixture, fuel, instruments, switches, hatches and harnesses. Then you're doing your maintenance cycle, so height, heading, speed, spacing, height 1,000 feet, heading, if your 2.9 is in use, you want 110, speed 105 knots approximately, and 1/3 wing spacing. Then 30 degrees to threshold as that trailing edge appears behind the wing. Carbide on, power 1300 RPM, attitude a third ground, 2/3 sky, speed 80 knots, and your trim. And then you're doing your base turn at 45 degrees. Choose a good preference point, look out, and limit it to 20 degrees angle bank. And then the burst cycle on base is the exact same attitude, but it's a little bit differently. So attitude 1/3 ground, 2/3 sky. Airspeed, you're adding that 5 knots as your stall speed increases by. So it's 80 knots, and aspect if you're judging if you're too high, too low, too close, or too far away from the runway. Make your turn onto final, so 600 feet approximately, or when you think you're at the correct aspect. Aim point will be about the numbers, since you've got a high nose attitude instead of 1/3 above the windscreen. Airspeed, you want 75 knots, and aspect judging if you're too high, too low on sunlight. Remember, you're using ailerons to get on that sunlight. Then you're doing 300 feet checks, flaps retracted, carried off, clearance obtained, and wind side checked. And then coming over the threshold and landing the aeroplane. With that threat of increased workload, the aero will be fixating on one task, so with undesired aircraft state will be losing situation awareness. So make sure you prioritize tasks and you seek instructor help. So in terms of a flapless landing, so power controls airspeed and attitude controls our aspect. Aim point. On base, it controls aspect, but on final, our attitude controls the aim point. So considerations, you've got a high airspeed, high nose attitude, less attitude changes in flare, so it'll be quite gradual. Effect of power changes will be more pronounced, so make sure you use small changes, otherwise large changes can increase your airspeed a lot, and you can't wash that airspeed off, and a longer float and landing roll. So make sure you wash off all the airspeed and you hold off the aeroplane. So 70 knots, you're doing your round out, coming over at your VREF, then your power is already idle, your eyes are at the end of the runway, and you're holding off and matching with that rate of sink, using your peripheral vision, and then you do touching down the main wheel, and then the nose wheel, and then you continue. You'll have that longer landing roll if you're doing a full stop, or you'll reach your rotate speed a lot quicker if you're doing a touch and go. And for a go around, so aviate, navigate, communicate. Most important consideration, whether you're doing a go around, you're in an emergency, doing a navigational exercise, you must follow. It's important we follow the bump message as a go around increases pilot workload, so you want to break it one step at a time. If going around, the first part is to aviate and fly the airplane to prevent an undesired aircraft state. Navigate the airplane in a safe and controlled manner, and then notify ATC. So the go-around procedure, aviate full power, and you're putting the climb attitude, so you're setting that nose on the horizon. Applying that right rudder due to that slipstream effect. And VSI confirm positive rate of climb, retract flaps one stage at a time, and carby off. Make sure you only retract at one stage at a time, and if you don't have a positive rate, don't retract the flaps. Navigate on parallel runways, go around on the live side and position yourself adjacent to the traffic so that you can see any traffic. On the CTAF, you'd go around on the dead side and then rejoin the circuit. And then tower can also tell you, join crosswind now, or if they don't tell you, turn at the end of the upwind leg, so and then turn onto crosswind, and then communicate and advise ATC/follow ATC instructions. The radio call will be, you must follow the tower instructions. If they tell you to go around, they're the boss, you must go around. So scenario, too close to an airplane making a full stop on the runway, so tower say, Alpha Bravo Charlie, go around. At that point, you can aviate. Navigate, communicate, and then once you've set the airplane up in the go around, you're going to say pilot going around runway left Alpha Bravo Charlie, then tower say Alpha Bravo Charlie, turn crosswind ready, and you can, since you've already got the airplane in control, you can reply straight away, turn crosswind Alpha Bravo Charlie. If tower does not tell you to turn crosswind, continue at the end of the upwind leg, then turn crosswind as well. And you must have active situation awareness and have a good listening watch. Another thing we'll also look at in our lesson is the light signals. So it's only used if, say, you had a communication failure or tower had a communication failure. So you must look at tower to see if the light signal is there. So steady green is you're authorised to land. If pilot is satisfied that no collision risk exists. Steady red, you must go around. Or if you haven't received clearance by 200 feet, and then look out for that light signal for return for landing. And if you've got that flashing red, aerodrome unsafe, do not land. A good alternate would be, Camden Airport for Bankstown Airport, or make sure you always know what a good alternate airport is. So if tower tells you to go around, you must go around. So airmanship flapless operation. So maintaining airspeed control is the most important factor when flying a flapless approach and landing. So remember the speeds coming in 5 knots higher, so it's really important to be good with your speed, just like with any normal landing. It's the same thing with a flapless landing. Watch out for circuit in the training area. In the circuit area. So that's really important. Circuit behind you, circuit ahead of you. What's going on? Is there any traffic landing? Doing a full stop, taking off. Reduce forward visibility due to the high nose attitude. So you really have to use your side vision and your peripheral vision. Controlled round out and flare. Remember, it's smooth, gradual movements, and longer float and landing roll as well. So anticipate that due to that faster airspeed and less drag. So airmanship go around. So make sure you have a positive and decisive decision. So if in doubt, go around. Smooth control inputs, no abrupt inputs as well. Identify a positive rate of climb before retracting flaps. And remember, do it at one stage at a time. Helicopter traffic passing 500 feet midfield. So it could be a situation where you're going around, but tower has positioned helicopter traffic to pass through. So you've got to really watch out as well and identify it as a hazard. Live/dead side, look out for traffic on the runway. So as you're sort of navigating along taxiway Bravo, watch out for the traffic. And delayed crosswind turn until past the end of the upwind leg, until tower tells you you can turn crosswind early. So in terms of threat and management, we've already sort of looked over these. So traffic, failure to identify traffic, too close to preceding traffic. So make sure you look out and identify and listen to tower as well. Increased workload, fixating on one task, prioritize tasks instructing assistance, and the undesired aircraft state would be a loss of situational awareness. So it's really important to maintain that, especially in the circuit area. Threat of weather, we looked at this. Check ATIS/consider wind, and then undesired aircraft state is a loss of cross control or excessive crosswind. So the error will be not checking your TAF, not checking to the ATIS as well. Unsafe approach, not identifying deviation standard, go around. Undesired aircraft state could be hard landing or damage to landing. These threats, these are 4 threats. They're certainly not limited to these 4. There's a lot more that exist. So make sure you're really aware of the threats and how you can manage them. So in terms of summary, we'll look at the objectives for this brief, for both flapless and go-arounds. We looked at revision from our stalling and circuit brief. We looked at definitions such as landing, climb, performance, and a go-around. We looked at the reasons for flapless approach, and I'll ask you questions. Characteristics of flapless approach of what we'll see, the reasons for go-around, and then we looked at the application, how to do a go-around, how to do a flapless landing, the light signals, and what the radio calls will look like. The airmanship and threat management considerations, so make sure you watch out for traffic, have a good listening watch, look out for weather, and make sure you make the good command decision to go around if you need to. So from memory, so I'll give you a moment and pause the video so you can come up with the answers, but I'll read the answers now. So 2 instances where flapless landing may be necessary. So it could be windy conditions or flap failure. So in terms of the correct approach speeds when performing flapless landing, you're adding that 5 knots. Correctly describe the anticipated nose attitude approach. So it's going to be a bit higher nose attitude than normal landing, and describe the effect flapless landing has on longer landing roll. So you're going to be a lot more faster, so it's going to make your landing roll a lot longer. So describe at least 2 instances when a go around may be necessary. So it could be not wings level by 400 feet using large S turns. Name someone who may instigate a go around. So it could be tower, or it could be the pilot. State what actions the pilot would take to go around. So full power, right rudder, nose on the horizon, navigate, taxiway Bravo, make sure flaps and carb off, and flaps retracted, and then communicate, and then turn onto crosswind. And then the pilot would take following the decision to go around. So just briefly, so navigate and taxiway Bravo, and if there's parallel runways, go around the live side, and then once you end of the upwind leg, turn crosswind. If it's a CTAF, then go around on the dead side. So thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next brief.